The desert was quiet under the evening sky. The sun was setting behind the pyramids, and the golden sand glowed with fading light. Tourists had left the area near the Great Sphinx, but one man remained. His name was David, a young archaeologist with restless eyes and hands always holding a notebook. David had been in Egypt for many months, working with a small team of researchers. Most of them had returned to Cairo for reports, but David stayed. Something inside him told him the sands were hiding a secret. He had spent long hours studying old scrolls, maps, and forgotten notes from past explorers. Some maps showed tunnels under the Sphinx, but none had ever been found. The government had done surveys and declared there was nothing beneath. Still, David believed the truth had not been uncovered. That evening, as the air cooled and the desert breeze touched his face, David sat near the giant paw of the Sphinx. He opened his notebook, tracing with his finger the strange symbol he had copied from an ancient papyrus. The mark looked like a door hidden beneath the stone body. The papyrus had been ignored by other scholars, but David felt it was real. As the sky grew darker, he decided to test the ground. He took a small metal rod and pushed it into the sand at different spots. At first, the rod struck hard stone, but then, near the left paw, it sank deeper than before. David frowned and tapped again. This time, he heard a faint hollow sound. His heart began to race. He cleared more sand with his hands, and soon the edge of a buried stone slab appeared. It looked different from the rest of the monument. The surface was smoother, and lines of carving were barely visible. David whispered to himself, "This is it. This has to be it." The wind blew across the desert, and for a moment he thought he heard a low vibration coming from the slab itself, as if the stone was alive. He stepped back, unsure if it was his imagination. The night was silent again, broken only by his own breathing. Excitement pushed away his fear. He picked up his tools and began working. He brushed the sand carefully, revealing more of the slab. The carvings became clearer. They were not like normal Egyptian hieroglyphs. Instead of animals and eyes, the carvings showed long, thin figures standing beside humans. The figures held something like staffs, and above them were circles with lines stretching outward, almost like stars or planets. David's hands shook as he traced one of the lines. The stone felt warmer than the cool desert air. He wrote quickly in his notebook, but his eyes kept returning to the strange symbols. Hours passed as he worked alone, the moon rising high above him. At last, he uncovered the full slab. In the center was the shape of a hand carved into the stone. Around the edges were markings that looked like they belonged to no language he had seen before. He placed his palm against the carved hand, curious. The stone vibrated softly under his touch, and the sound returned, deep and low. Startled, he pulled back, but then a fine line of dust fell as the slab shifted slightly. His heart pounded. He pressed again, harder this time. With a grinding noise, the stone slab moved downward, revealing the top of a staircase descending into darkness. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the scent of age and dust untouched for thousands of years. David's first thought was to call the others. But then he remembered the endless meetings, the dismissive looks from his fellow archaeologists, the way they had laughed when he spoke about hidden chambers. If he called now, they might stop him from entering. This was his chance, perhaps the only chance, to prove he was right. He hesitated at the edge of the opening. The desert night stretched around him, quiet and endless. The Sphinx loomed above, its silent face staring at the stars. For a moment he felt small, like a child before something too great to understand. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. He lit his lamp, its warm glow pushing back the shadows, and stepped onto the first stair. The stone was smooth, almost polished, though no hand had touched it in countless years. He took another step, then another, his breath echoing softly in the narrow passage. The air grew cooler as he descended, and the sound of the desert faded behind him. He felt as if he were leaving the world he knew and walking into another. Strange symbols lined the walls beside him, faint but visible in the lamp's light. They seemed to move when he passed, as if watching him. Finally, he reached a landing. Before him stood another stone door, far larger than the first. It was golden in color, though not like paint or metal placed on the surface. It seemed to glow faintly, as if the stone itself carried light. In the middle of the door was another handprint, waiting. David raised his lamp, staring in awe. He could not believe what he was seeing. He whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own voice, "This is not Egyptian. This is something else." He reached out his hand but stopped just short of the print. His mind raced with questions. Who built this? Why was it hidden? What would happen if he opened it? The chamber was silent, but he felt as if something behind the door was listening. He lowered his hand and stepped back, his heart pounding louder than the silence around him. He knew he had found something that could change everything history had ever told about Egypt, about humanity itself. As the lamp flickered, he made a choice. He would not turn back. Tomorrow could wait. The others could wait. Tonight, the secret belonged to him alone. He sat on the cool stone floor, notebook in his lap, staring at the golden door. Above ground, the stars wheeled silently over the desert. Beneath the Sphinx, David waited, feeling the pull of a mystery older than time itself. David could not sleep that night. He sat on the stone floor, his lamp glowing softly, his eyes fixed on the golden door before him. Every part of his body told him to wait, to be careful, but his heart pushed him forward. The door seemed to whisper without sound, as if it wanted him to enter. At last, he stood up. He placed his lamp on a small ledge and touched the carved handprint on the door. The surface felt cold, almost alive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint hum filled the chamber, deep and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. Slowly, the golden door slid aside. A rush of cold air swept past him, carrying the dry smell of stone sealed for countless years. His lamp flickered, but the passage beyond glowed faintly on its own, as though the walls were painted with hidden light. David lifted his lamp anyway, taking careful steps forward. He moved down a narrow hallway, the golden surface shifting to smooth stone again. Strange carvings lined both sides. They were not like Egyptian hieroglyphs. Instead, they showed tall, thin beings standing beside humans. The humans knelt or reached upward, while the tall figures raised their hands toward the sky. Above them, circles and lines formed shapes that looked like planets, moons, and stars. David paused, brushing his fingers lightly across the carvings. The stone pulsed faintly beneath his touch. He pulled his hand back quickly, heart racing. He wrote in his notebook by the dim light, but he kept glancing at the walls as if they might move. The corridor sloped downward, and the deeper he went, the cooler the air became. Drops of water echoed somewhere far away, though the desert above was dry. His footsteps sounded too loud in the silence. He felt as though unseen eyes followed him, watching every movement. At one point, the hallway widened into a small chamber. In the center stood a statue. David raised his lamp, and his breath caught. The statue was not Egyptian in style. It was tall, slender, with long arms and a face unlike any human face he knew. The eyes were larger, the nose small, the mouth thin. Its hands rested on a staff that touched the ground. Around its feet were carvings of humans, smaller in scale, looking up toward the figure. David felt a chill. Was this how the ancients had seen gods? Could it be that their gods had been something else, something not of this earth? He circled the statue, studying every detail. The stone was so finely worked it seemed almost alive. As he passed behind it, his lamp revealed words etched into the base. The script was strange, curved and flowing. He did not recognize it, yet a part of his mind felt it almost familiar. David quickly copied the symbols into his notebook, though he knew he could not translate them. His hand trembled, and for a moment he thought he saw the statue's eyes glimmer in the lamp's reflection. He shook his head, telling himself it was only his imagination. He pressed on. Beyond the statue, the passage narrowed again and the floor began to descend in wide, shallow steps. His lamp showed more carvings, this time of ships sailing not on water but through the sky. They had long shapes, smooth and sharp, unlike anything built by ancient Egyptians. Humans were drawn boarding these ships, led by the tall figures. David whispered to himself, "This cannot be real." Yet everything around him was solid stone. Every carving felt older than history itself. The stairs went deeper and deeper. At times, he thought he felt a vibration under his feet, as if something far below was still alive. He stopped often to listen, but the silence always returned. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the bottom. The stairs ended in a vast hall. His lamp's light could not reach the far walls, but the chamber glowed faintly with the same golden hue he had seen before. The floor was smooth, reflecting light as though polished metal. David stepped forward slowly, each movement echoing in the vast emptiness. His heart pounded as he looked around. To his left, giant pillars stretched upward into shadow, carved with spirals and symbols. To his right, long panels on the walls showed maps of stars. He recognized some constellations, but others were unknown to him. He raised his lamp higher, and his eyes fell upon something at the center of the hall. A large structure stood there, shaped like a doorway but filled with solid stone. Around its edges ran lines of gold that pulsed faintly, as though carrying light inside them. David walked closer, unable to look away. The doorway was taller than any man, its frame decorated with more carvings of humans and tall beings together. But here, something was different. The humans were no longer kneeling. They stood side by side with the tall figures, reaching upward together. He stared at the golden lines, wondering what they meant. They reminded him of circuits on machines, not decorations of stone. Could this be a kind of technology hidden inside the earth? His hands shook as he touched one of the glowing lines. A jolt of warmth spread through his fingers. For a second, he felt his vision blur. Stars flashed in his mind, endless and bright, and he saw Earth from far above, blue and small. Then the vision was gone. David stumbled back, breathing hard. He pressed his back against a pillar, trying to steady himself. His notebook fell to the ground, pages fluttering. He stared at the doorway, afraid yet drawn to it. The silence in the hall deepened, and he thought he heard a low whisper, though no one was there. The voice was not clear, only a feeling, telling him to continue, telling him to step forward. He picked up his notebook and clutched it close. Sweat covered his forehead though the air was cool. He wanted to leave, to run back up the stairs and escape into the desert night. But another part of him wanted more. He had already come too far. Slowly, he approached the doorway again. He noticed something he had missed before. At the base of the structure was another carved handprint, glowing faintly with golden light. David raised his hand. His fingers hovered over the mark. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it echo in his ears. If he placed his hand there, something would happen. He did not know what. But he knew this was the reason he had come, the reason he had been searching for so long. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his palm into the glowing mark. The golden lines flared brighter. The ground trembled under his feet. A deep sound filled the hall, a sound like thunder rolling from the center of the earth. The doorway began to shift. The solid stone inside it cracked, lines of light spreading outward like veins of fire. Dust fell from above as the entire chamber shook. David stepped back, eyes wide. The doorway was opening. Something was waiting beyond. And he had awakened it. The doorway cracked open with a sound like stone grinding against stone. Golden light spilled through the cracks, bright yet soft, as if the glow came from within the air itself. Dust swirled around David as the chamber trembled, then grew still. When the shaking stopped, David lowered his hands from his ears and stared. The stone that had once sealed the doorway was gone. In its place was an opening leading into a vast space beyond. His lamp flickered weakly in his hand, almost useless against the golden glow that filled the air. He hesitated at the threshold, his heart racing. Everything inside him screamed that he was crossing into a place not meant for human eyes. But his curiosity was stronger than his fear. David stepped forward. The chamber stretched far wider than he expected, like a hall carved by giants. The walls were smooth and glimmered with golden light, yet they looked untouched by time. The air was cool and carried no dust, as though it had been sealed perfectly for thousands of years. He turned slowly, taking in the sight. The walls were covered in vast murals, not painted but etched deep into the shining surface. He saw scenes of ships gliding through space, their long forms cutting across the stars. He saw humans walking among tall figures with luminous eyes. The humans held tools, weapons, and scrolls, as if being taught. Every panel told a story. One showed humans standing on Earth, pointing at the sky as the tall figures descended in glowing ships. Another showed pyramids rising, with the tall beings standing beside humans as if guiding them. The final mural stretched across an entire wall, showing humans standing alone, holding torches while the tall figures faded into the distance. It felt like a farewell. David's chest tightened as he studied it. He whispered to himself, "They left us. But why?" In the center of the chamber stood a great pedestal, tall and wide, with steps leading up to it. Upon the pedestal rested a pot unlike anything he had ever seen. It was not stone. It was not gold. It was a smooth, metallic surface that reflected the golden light. The pot pulsed faintly with a soft hum, like a living thing asleep. David approached carefully, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. His lamp was no longer needed, the chamber itself glowed brighter the closer he came to the pod. He set the lamp down at the base of the steps and climbed slowly. Standing before the pod, he felt small. The surface was smooth, without any seam or opening, yet it vibrated faintly as if something inside was alive. A faint mist curled around its edges, and David realized the pod was not cold but warm. He reached out, hesitated, then touched it with the tips of his fingers. At once, his mind filled with a deep sound, not words but a voice without language. It spoke inside his thoughts, heavy and slow. "You should not be here." David gasped and pulled back. He looked around the chamber, but no one was there. His breath echoed in the silence. The voice had not come through his ears. It had come directly into his mind. He steadied himself and whispered, "Who are you?" The hum grew louder for a moment, then faded again into a slow rhythm. No answer came, but he felt a presence, as if something inside the pod had awakened and now watched him. David forced himself to breathe calmly. He opened his notebook and scribbled what he had seen, though his hands trembled. The letters came out uneven, and the page shook under his pen. He looked back at the murals on the walls, then at the pod again. Could this be one of the tall beings? Had they left one behind? Why here, under the Sphinx? He circled the pod, studying every side. The golden floor reflected his image faintly, making him feel as though he was walking in two worlds at once. At the back of the pod, he found another carving. This one was a circle filled with lines and dots. It looked like a map of stars. He traced the pattern with his finger, and again he felt warmth under his touch. For a heartbeat, the golden chamber disappeared. He saw stars, thousands of them, floating in black space. His body was no longer in the chamber, he felt weightless, drifting among constellations. He recognized Orion, Sirius, and others he had studied, but then he saw stars he did not know. They pulsed faintly, as if marking destinations. The vision ended as quickly as it had begun, and David staggered back, almost falling. He clutched the edge of the pedestal to steady himself, his breath ragged. The pod hummed louder now, the sound filling the chamber. The golden wall seemed to glow brighter. David dropped his notebook without realizing, his eyes fixed on the pod. Then the surface shifted. A line appeared down the center, splitting open with a soft hiss. Mist poured out as the pod slowly unfolded. David froze, unable to move. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs would not obey. He watched as the pod opened fully, revealing a figure inside. The being was tall, taller than any human David had ever seen, its body wrapped in ancient armor that shimmered with the same golden light. Its eyes were closed, and its head rested against the curved back of the pod. As the mist cleared, the being's eyes opened. They were not human. They shone with a metallic gleam, like liquid silver. The being's gaze fell directly on David. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the being spoke. The words were strange, foreign, but somehow David understood them. You have opened what was sealed. Why? David swallowed hard. His voice shook as he answered, I had to know. I wanted to find the truth. The being studied him in silence. Its eyes glowed faintly brighter. Then it said, few among your kind are chosen to stand here. Few have the courage to descend. David's heart raced. Who are you? He asked. The being stepped forward, its movements slow but powerful. The floor seemed to tremble beneath its weight. I am the last guardian of the chamber, it said. I waited for the one who would come. Now you are here. The hum of the chamber deepened, echoing like distant thunder. The golden murals on the walls flickered, their light shifting as though alive. David stood frozen, torn between awe and fear. He knew that whatever came next would change not only his life but perhaps the history of all humanity. The golden chamber had awakened. And there was no turning back. The figure stepped out of the pod with slow, steady movements. Its tall frame seemed to fill the golden chamber with presence alone. David gripped his notebook tightly, though he knew writing now was impossible. His hands shook too much, and his eyes refused to leave the being before him. The armor covering the figure shimmered like no metal he had ever seen. Each plate curved with perfect design, flowing like part of the body itself. Ancient, yet unmarked by time. Symbols glowed faintly across its chest, moving like rivers of light. The being's silver eyes studied David with a calm, heavy gaze. When it spoke, its voice did not echo in the air but vibrated inside David's mind, clear and deep. You are human. David nodded quickly, his throat dry. Yes. My name is David. Who are you? The being tilted its head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Then it replied, I am a sentinel, placed here when the stars were still young. My duty was to guard the chamber until the worthy came. David's voice trembled. The worthy? Why me? The sentinel raised one long arm, pointing at the murals on the golden wall. Long ago, your kind stood beside mine. Together we shaped the beginning of your world. We taught you fire, stone, and the ways of the stars. But the time came when you were to walk alone. We left, sealing the chambers so that only one with courage and will could find them. David followed the sentinel's gesture, staring at the murals. The story carved there now seemed alive, as if it matched the words spoken. Humans learning, humans guided, humans left behind. But why hide it? David asked. Why bury all this under the Sphinx? The sentinel's silver eyes glowed faintly brighter. Because truth must be earned. If given too easily, it becomes forgotten. Only those who seek beyond fear are ready to hear. David swallowed. The air around him felt heavier, as if the chamber itself pressed against his chest. And what happens now? The sentinel turned and walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. With each step, the golden floor rippled faintly with light. David hesitated but followed, clutching his notebook like a shield. At the heart of the room, a round platform rose from the floor, glowing with spiraling patterns. The sentinel stepped onto it and raised a hand. At once, the walls of the chamber shifted. The murals faded, replaced by a vast map of stars stretching across the walls and ceiling. David gasped. Constellations he knew shimmered among thousands he did not. The galaxy spread around him, glowing in golden lines of light. It felt as if the chamber had turned into the universe itself. The sentinel's voice filled his mind again. Before you stand the stars. Each mark is a memory, each line a path. Humanity once walked these paths. But now you have forgotten. David shook his head slowly. We look at the stars still. We send machines, even people, into space. We are trying. The sentinel turned its glowing gaze toward him. You are trying, yes. But you are not yet united. You fight among yourselves, build walls, forget your shared beginning. The test was meant to see if one of you could come here and face the truth without fear. You have done so. David's breath caught. Does that mean I passed? The sentinel did not answer at once. Its tall frame stood silent, as if weighing something unseen. Then it said, you have stepped where few dared. But courage alone is not enough. You must prove wisdom. You must prove choice. The platform before them shifted. A golden sphere rose from the floor, glowing brighter than the rest of the chamber. Its surface rippled like liquid, and faint images swirled within it, faces, places, memories. David took a step back. What is that? The sentinel's voice grew deeper. This is the sphere of truth. Step within it, and it will show you your fears, your desires, your doubts. If you stand firm, if you hold to what makes humanity strong, then you will be judged worthy. If not, the chamber will close, and your kind will remain blind for another age. David stared at the sphere, his chest tight. His mind spun with questions. What if he failed? What if he was not the right one? He had come here out of curiosity, not destiny. Could he carry the weight of humanity on his shoulders? But when he looked back at the murals, at the humans standing with torches as the tall beings left, something stirred in him. Those humans had faced the unknown too. They had walked forward without guidance. Perhaps this was no different. David drew a deep breath. I'll do it. The sentinel inclined its head slowly, almost like a bow. Then stepped forward. David approached the glowing sphere. Its light bathed his face, warm but strong, almost too strong. He reached out a trembling hand. As his fingers touched the surface, it gave way like water, and in a heartbeat he was pulled inside. The chamber vanished. David stood in darkness. Then shapes formed around him, familiar, yet twisted. He saw the desert above, but the pyramids were broken, the Sphinx shattered. He saw people running, fighting, shadows spreading across the sky. A voice whispered in his ear, soft but sharp. This is what you fear. A world where nothing remains, where humanity destroys itself. David clenched his fists. It is only an illusion. But then he saw himself. Standing alone in the ruins, holding nothing, forgotten. He heard laughter behind him, the voices of his fellow scholars mocking him, saying he had wasted his life chasing myths. He turned away, refusing to listen. No, I came here for truth. Not for glory, not for them. For truth. The darkness shifted again. He now stood in a hall filled with riches, gold piled high, crowns and jewels. Hands reached out, offering him power, fame, endless recognition. The whisper returned. This is what you desire. You could be remembered forever, king among men. Take it. David's breath shook. He had dreamed of being respected, of proving himself. But as he stared at the piles of treasure, he felt hollow. None of it mattered compared to what he had already seen. No, he said firmly. Humanity doesn't need more greed. We need knowledge. We need hope. The golden riches melted away. The darkness thinned, replaced by light. For a moment, David floated in silence, his chest heaving, his mind clear. Then the light broke, and he stumbled back into the chamber. The golden sphere dissolved into nothing, fading like mist. The sentinel stood before him, its silver eyes brighter than before. Its voice filled his mind once more. You faced the illusions. You chose truth over fear, wisdom over desire. You are worthy. David's knees weakened with relief. He almost fell but caught himself. He looked up at the sentinel, his eyes wide with hope. What happens now? He whispered. The sentinel lifted its hand, and the star map across the walls shifted again. Hidden patterns emerged, glowing brighter. They formed trails, routes across the galaxy, with Earth at the center. Now, the sentinel said, you will see what was hidden. You will carry the legacy of your kind. The chamber pulsed with golden light, as if the heart of the Sphinx itself was beating once more. And David knew that his journey was only beginning. The golden light faded from the walls, but the memory of the star map burned in David's mind. He had seen pathways stretching across the galaxy, roads that humans had once known. His heart pounded with wonder, but also with fear. Why had this been forgotten? Why had humanity been left behind? The sentinel stood still, its tall frame glowing faintly in the chamber's light. Its silver eyes never blinked, never looked away from David. When it finally spoke, its voice filled his thoughts like a deep echo. You have taken the first step. But knowledge without strength is fragile. To carry the legacy of your kind, you must face the test of will. David's breath caught. He thought he had already been tested in the sphere of illusions. Another test, he asked softly. The sentinel inclined its head. The first was the reflection of your heart. The second is the weight of choice. Only then will the chamber reveal its final truth. David felt his knees weaken, but he nodded. I'll face it. The sentinel raised a long hand. The floor beneath them shifted, glowing lines spreading outward like rivers of fire. The ground trembled, and a new circle rose in the center of the chamber. It was wide, flat, and shining with strange symbols. Step into the circle, the sentinel commanded. David swallowed hard. His lamp sat forgotten behind him, its flame dim. The golden glow of the chamber was all he needed now. Slowly, he walked to the circle and stepped onto its smooth surface. The instant his foot touched it, a low hum filled the air. The symbols lit up, one after another, until the entire circle glowed beneath him. The light rose like mist, surrounding him in a golden veil. The chamber disappeared. David blinked and found himself standing in a wide desert, though not the one he knew. The sand was black, the sky red with clouds of fire. In the distance, towers of broken stone lay half buried, their shapes strange and sharp. The sentinel's voice echoed all around him, though the being itself was not there. This is the desert of endings. Here you must choose the path of your people. David turned slowly, his chest tight. The air was heavy, hard to breathe. Behind him stood a city, but not like Cairo or any city on earth. It was tall and shining, with buildings of light and bridges stretching high above. Humans walked there, their faces calm, their steps steady. Before him, across the black desert, he saw another vision. Armies marched, their weapons glowing with fire. Machines of war rolled across the sand, and smoke filled the sky. Humans were there too, but they shouted, fought, and fell. The sentinel's voice grew louder. Your kind stands at a crossroad. One path is unity, knowledge, and peace. The other is division, fear, and destruction. Both live in the heart of humanity. Which will you choose? David's heart pounded. I can't choose for all humanity. I'm just one man. Yet one voice begins the chorus. One step begins the journey, the sentinel replied. Your choice here will echo. Show the chamber what lies within you. David turned again, staring at the shining city. It called to him with peace and order, a dream of what humanity could be. Then he looked at the marching armies. They seemed real, too real. He knew his kind fought wars, spilled blood, built walls. That truth could not be denied. He closed his eyes. The weight of choice pressed on him. He could not pretend humanity was perfect. But he also could not ignore the courage, the kindness, the sparks of greatness he had seen. Finally, he spoke. His voice trembled but grew stronger with each word. Humanity is not only light or only darkness. We are both. We fall, but we rise again. We fight, but we also build. I will not choose only one. I choose the path forward, with all our weakness and all our strength together. That is who we are. The desert trembled. The black sand cracked, and golden light poured upward through the ground. The armies vanished, the smoke disappeared, and the red sky split open, showing stars beyond. The shining city remained, but now it was not perfect. Its towers bore cracks, its bridges leaned, yet people still walked, still worked, still lived. The light around them grew brighter, not from the city, but from the people themselves. David opened his eyes wide. His words had shaped the vision. The sentinel's voice returned, calm and steady. You have spoken with truth. Humanity is not flawless, but neither is it lost. Strength lies not in being perfect, but in rising each time you fall. The golden light rose higher, wrapping David like a warm storm. He shielded his eyes, but the glow poured into him, filling his chest, his mind, his very soul. For a moment, he felt connected to something vast, something greater than himself. Then the vision shattered. David fell to his knees. When he looked up, he was back in the golden chamber beneath the Sphinx. The glowing circle dimmed, sinking slowly into the floor until it was gone. The chamber was still again, silent except for the soft hum of energy in the air. The sentinel stood where it had been before, its silver eyes fixed on him. It inclined its head. The test is complete. You have chosen the truth of your kind. The chamber accepts you. David breathed hard, sweat covering his face. His whole body felt weak, yet something inside him burned brighter than ever. He had seen humanity's two faces, darkness and light, and he had chosen both. He stood, his legs unsteady but strong enough to carry him. What happens now? He asked. The sentinel stepped forward. Its armor glowed faintly, and the murals on the walls lit once more. This time, the images had changed. David saw humans not kneeling or guided, but walking beside the tall beings as equals. Then, in the final scene, the tall beings were gone, but humans stood together beneath the stars, holding tools, ships, and banners of light. The sentinel raised its hand. A small object rose from the floor, a crystal, glowing softly with golden fire. It floated toward David, stopping in front of him. Take it, the sentinel said. This is the key. Within it lies the map, the memory, and the seed of what was left for you. Guard it well. One day, your people will be ready to follow the stars again. David reached out slowly and took the crystal in his hands. It was warm, vibrating softly, as though alive. He stared at it, speechless. The sentinel's silver eyes dimmed slightly. My duty ends when the worthy one arrives. Soon I will return to the silence from which I came. The rest is in your hands, human. David's chest tightened. He wanted to ask more questions about the stars, about the beings, about what humanity was meant to become. But he knew the answers might not come. Some truths had to be discovered, not given. He looked down at the crystal, then back at the sentinel. I will guard it. I promise. The chamber pulsed once, like a heartbeat of light. The sentinel stood still, tall and unmoving, like a statue of living stone. The golden glow dimmed to a calm shine. David realized the test was over. But his journey, and humanity's journey, was only beginning. The golden sphere floated in the air, glowing brighter as the chamber filled with a low humming sound. David felt his chest tighten as though invisible hands were pressing against him. The tall being stood silently, watching with calm eyes that reflected the light. It said nothing. The test had already begun. David stepped closer to the sphere. At first, it was only light, soft and warm, like sunlight on his face. But when he reached out, the glow changed. His vision blurred, and the chamber seemed to vanish. He was no longer standing in the golden room but in a vast desert where the wind howled, carrying dust that stung his eyes. He looked around and realized he was alone. The Sphinx was gone. The being was gone. Even the stars in the sky had vanished. Only endless sand stretched out in all directions. Fear crept into his chest. The silence was heavy, and for a moment, he thought he might be trapped in this place forever. His throat dried, and he whispered to himself, "This is not real. This is the test." Still, the fear felt real. He began to walk through the sand, but every step was harder than the last. The ground pulled at his feet as if trying to drag him under. He struggled forward until he saw something in the distance, a small figure sitting in the sand. As he moved closer, he realized it was his late father. His father looked tired, old, and weak. He stretched out his hand and said, "David, stay with me. Do not go forward. The world beyond this is dangerous. You will suffer, and you will fail." David froze. His heart ached to see the man he had lost years ago. But deep inside, he knew this was an illusion. It was not his father. It was the sphere testing his heart. He shook his head and said, "I miss you, but this is not real. I must go on." The image of his father faded into dust, carried away by the desert wind. The scene changed again. David now stood in a grand hall filled with treasures. Gold, jewels, and shining artifacts were piled higher than mountains. His eyes widened at the beauty of it. A voice whispered around him, "Take it. You deserve it. With this, you can rule the world. You can control history itself." For a moment, his hand reached toward the nearest jewel. He thought about the struggles of his life, the poverty of his childhood, the difficulties he had faced to become an archaeologist. He could end it all now. He could take what was offered. But then he remembered the being's words. The test was not about greed. It was about courage and wisdom. He pulled his hand back and said, "No. Humanity does not need to be chained by gold. We need hope, not treasure." The jewels turned to sand and slipped through his fingers. The hall dissolved around him. Now he stood on a battlefield. Smoke rose into the sky. The ground was covered in broken machines and silent soldiers. He felt heavy sorrow. A voice came again, deeper and darker this time. "This is the future of your people. They will destroy themselves. Why protect them? Why fight for them? Give up now, and you will have peace." David dropped to his knees. The pain was overwhelming. He saw children crying in the ruins, their faces full of fear. He wanted to shut his eyes and escape it all. But then he thought of the real world. He thought of the men and women who built the pyramids, who sailed across oceans, who reached into space with rockets and dreams. He thought of humanity's endless will to rise, no matter how many times they fell. He stood tall and shouted into the smoke, "Humanity is not perfect, but we will not give up. We always rise again. I will not give up on them." The battlefield cracked like glass, breaking into pieces of light. The smoke disappeared, and suddenly David was back in the golden chamber. The sphere floated silently before him, dim now, as if its power had been drained. The tall being stepped forward, its voice strong yet calm. "You have faced the test and spoken with truth. Many before you entered this place, but they failed. Some chose greed. Some chose despair. You chose hope. That is the strength of humanity." David was still shaking, his body tired, but his heart burned with new strength. He asked, "Why me? Why now?" The being raised its hand, and the walls of the chamber shifted. The golden light expanded, shaping itself into a map of the stars. Points of light connected into paths, showing planets and hidden marks across the galaxy. "This knowledge was locked away until one of your kind proved worthy," the being said. "Your people were once part of the stars. That past is gone, but the future remains. You may choose to carry the secret or to bury it again. But remember, humanity is not alone. One day, you will rise to the stars again." David gazed at the glowing map. He felt the weight of the choice. He could share it with the world, but he knew greed and fear would cause chaos. Or he could protect it until the right moment came. The being looked at him with eyes full of silent power. "The choice is yours, human. That is the final test." David placed his hand on his chest and spoke firmly. "I will guard it. Humanity is not ready yet. But when the time comes, this knowledge will guide us. Until then, it will remain safe." The being bowed its head as though satisfied. The sphere sank into the floor and vanished. The golden walls dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of the central crystal in David's hand. The test was over, but the journey of humanity was only beginning. The golden chamber began to fade. The tall being slowly stepped back into the shadows, its glowing form dissolving into the walls until only silence remained. David stood alone, holding the crystal that pulsed gently in his hand. The map of stars was gone, but he knew it was now hidden within the crystal. It was his burden, his treasure, and his test. He took a deep breath, his chest still heavy with the weight of the choice he had made. The chamber's light dimmed further until only a faint glow outlined the massive stone door. The Sphinx above waited in silence, guarding the secret as it had for thousands of years. David walked toward the passage. As he stepped out of the golden hall, the door sealed behind him, vanishing into the stone as though it had never been there. Only sand and silence remained. Climbing back up was harder than going down. His body was weak, his clothes torn, and his mind full of thoughts. Every sound in the tunnel echoed loudly, as though the Sphinx itself was whispering. When he finally reached the surface, night had already fallen. The desert sky stretched wide and endless, stars shining like a sea of diamonds above him. He stood at the base of the Sphinx and looked up at its timeless face. It seemed different now, alive in some quiet way. He whispered softly, "I understand now. You were never just stone. You were a guardian." The wind swept across the sand, carrying his words away. Far on the horizon, the lights of Cairo glowed faintly. David knew he could not return there and announce what he had seen. The world was not ready for this knowledge. If he told others about the chamber, they would dig, fight, and destroy for power. The crystal could change everything: science, history, even the future of space travel, but in the wrong hands, it could bring ruin. He wrapped the crystal in cloth and placed it close to his chest. He would protect it, even if no one ever believed him. For many days, David stayed near the desert, trying to process what had happened. He looked at the sky often, remembering the star map he had seen in the chamber. Some of those stars still shined above him. They were real, not illusions. The path was there, waiting for humanity. One night, as he sat by a small campfire, he wrote in his notebook, "The Sphinx holds the truth of our forgotten past. Beneath it lies not treasure of gold but treasure of wisdom. Humanity is greater than it believes. One day, we will rise again to meet the stars. Until then, this secret must be protected. He closed the book and stared at the fire. His heart was heavy but also full of hope. Weeks later, David returned to the city. He was thinner, his eyes tired, but he carried himself with a new strength. His colleagues asked him about his long absence. Some joked that he had been lost in the desert chasing myths. He only smiled and said little. He gave them his notes about ordinary discoveries: the cracks in the stones, the tunnels that led nowhere, the sands that covered forgotten walls. But the truth, the golden chamber, he kept hidden deep in his heart. At night, alone in his small room, he would study the crystal. It glowed softly in the dark, and sometimes he thought he could hear faint echoes, like distant voices. He wondered if the being still watched him, or if the chamber below still lived, waiting for the next human. He also wondered about the choice he had made. Was it right to hide the truth? Or should he have shared it with the world? Each time doubt entered his mind, he remembered the illusions he had faced: the greed of gold, the despair of war. Humanity was not yet ready. One day it would be. Until then, the secret must remain. Years passed. David continued his work as an archaeologist, but he never again searched beneath the Sphinx. He traveled to other lands, studied ruins, and uncovered stories from forgotten times. Yet none compared to what he had seen in that golden chamber. He grew older, his hair turning gray, but his spirit stayed strong. Sometimes, he would look at the stars and smile, remembering the map that had shown him paths across the galaxy. Humanity's journey was not bound to Earth alone. The future was larger than anyone could imagine. Before his final days, he placed the crystal inside a small metal box. On its lid, he carved simple words, "For those who are ready." He hid it in a place only a true seeker would find, leaving behind clues in his notebooks. He did not know when, or who, would discover it. But he believed someone would. Long after David was gone, the desert wind still swept around the Sphinx. Generations of visitors came and went, staring at its silent face, never knowing what lay beneath. But the crystal remained, hidden and waiting. And above, the stars shined as always, their light carrying the promise of tomorrow. Somewhere in that vast sky, worlds waited, and the path was still open. The Sphinx, carved by ancient hands, kept its eternal watch. It was more than stone, more than a monument. It was a bridge between past and future, a guardian of humanity's hidden truth. And so the legacy remained. Not of gold, not of power, but of hope. Hope that one day, when humanity was ready, they would remember who they truly were and rise to the stars once more.